And then here is for African Americans, it's still the case that the top 10, with the exception of UMBC, are HBCUs. We're the only predominantly white. My campus has about 15% black, 1-5, okay? With kids from 150 countries. And the challenge we faced from the beginning of Meyerhoff was that my best prepared students tended to come from other countries, or their parents were from other countries. Whether we were talking about China or India or Russia, that was the challenge. And so this is one of the reasons people have tried, because the experiment for the 50 years since I was marching was, now that we've begun to have minorities in predominantly white institutions, now that, I mean, whether it's Georgia Tech or Clemson, these places all integrated for the first time in the early 60s. But if you look at my alma mater, Urbana-Champaign, Champaign-Urbana, the number of minorities, of blacks there before the 60s would have been 1%. 1%. You know, in fact, when I went there in mathematics, the wonderful mathematician Blackwell had been there back in, I think, the late 40s. He was the only one in a 20-year period, you see. So the point is, it's only been in the 60s that we began to have. So the experiment, this is the experiment. How much progress have we made? We have gone up from 2% to 10% to 20% blacks getting college degrees, and Hispanics are now up to 14%, whites up to about 32%. But in science and engineering, this is where we are. And if you look at it, this is what I want you to see, that even among the HBCUs, Howard is over a 10-year period, you're talking about not 12 a year. You know, we at this point up to between 6 and 7 a year who actually finish PhDs. And it has everything to do with funding. It always has to do with funding. And it really does have everything to do with how do we find a way to have the funds in the models that work, so we can both replicate those models, I would argue, and produce many more students than we've had before. Now, looking in the past 5 years, I am more encouraged than ever, just because, quite frankly, for us, we are making progress with the numbers. But again, you still see, you're talking about no other predominantly white university in the last 5 years in this group. If a predominantly white institution was producing 3 a year who got PhDs, they'd be in this, 3 a year who went on, they'd be in this group. This is how small the numbers are. And I would say to you, the real question is, why is this important? Well, what you may not know, it is true that minority-serving institutions, Hispanic institutions, actually graduate a large percentage of students who are Hispanic. For African Americans, only 20% of black kids are in HBCUs. Families send their students, and many of the best prepared students, to predominantly white universities. And they start off in these areas, and they become lawyers, or they go into business. And when people say, well, it's because you can make more money, that's not the reason. We've looked at it. That is not the reason. It is that they did not do well in those courses. Now, the best news about our report is that more and more campuses and even national agencies like NSF are focusing on the first basic problem, which is the first year experience. The first year, I've probably spoken at a dozen campuses, major research universities, to talk about these issues. And it begins with the first, because the first question is, does the campus know how well different students have done? Has the campus analyzed who succeeds and who does not? Has the campus looked throughout the period to say, okay, of the alumni, what can we say about their test scores and their grades and their attitudes and the faculty members who work with them in order to understand what success has meant to date? And then what have they done to look at what has happened with those who did not make it?